This week, we've got Mullet MadJack, some kerfuffles from Square Enix, Dread Delusion, and we revisit Death Must Die.
Hi, I'm Nick, and I said I was ready to have a thing ready.
Hi, I'm Josh, and a friendly reminder that John Wayne was racist.
And I'm Andy. This is Video Game Tango. Hey, everybody, welcome back.
Hello.
Wow, that was forceful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to feel that one.
And he always
I hope
wants to start with a bang, and then just immediate boom.
Yeah. Well, listen,
Right into vibe mode.
this isn't where we start because we record the intro later.
Yeah. No, I mean,
For you guys, it's the first thing you see. So you're already prepared for exuberance.
Time.
Yeah. So,
flat circle.
this is Video Game Tango. This is where we talk about video games mostly, video game news, video game industry, and etc. Today on the docket, let's talk about a video game, Nick.
We've been in a bit of a malaise, a dour melange of what to play. The world's going to shit. And I thought, I should look into what are some kooky, weird, fun, spicy little nuggets of joy, nice little dopamine cycle. And the algorithm blessed me with a very recently released, as of today, Mullet MadJack. I have a list that I will bring up as I continue to talk, but let me describe this game as described by the developer. Your health is time. You must kill to get more time. We are in the 90s, the 2090s to be exact. Mullet MadJack is a frantic first-person action game set in Josh's phone call, also known as a vintage anime world. In this future, man and internet have merged into a new being. This being needs to dopamine every 10 seconds or else it will die. This game reminded me of quite a few games. Among the list is Angerfoot, of which I played the demo back in the Steam Next Fest. Post Void, which is pretty much the same game, but an entirely different art vibe and theme set. Ultra Kill, RoboQuest, and Neon White. There's a lot of Miami Vice here. It is a hoot. Watching it tells me immediately this is one of those games that is never going, you're not going to be able to experience it by watching it, right? It is specifically designed as this extreme adrenaline, intense, short burst of activity that gives you lots of room for mastery through its various difficulty systems. It has a very light, roguelite progression. Every 10 levels, there's a boss, and in each of those 10 levels, you get in between match upgrades, but then they get removed for the next 10 levels. There's a small amount of full game meta progression after a run, but the goal is really to master the systems. What does this game do that all those games that I mentioned don't, or what does it do that they do but maybe better? It has had kind of the time and experience to learn from a lot of these and to find its identity. What seemed to be most noticeable from the people who played it is that your various actions, from kicking enemies to stun them, to reloading your gun, to shooting, to drinking a soda to gain more time, are all doable at the same time. You can be booting someone into an explosion while you're shooting somebody else on the side of the screen, and as you're reloading your gun, you're grabbing an axe off the ground to melee ultimate another person. Every kill gives you more seconds, because at the start of the clock, again, like they said, you have 10 seconds before you die. The cooler the kill, whether that's kicking a guy into a spinning fan or blowing his nards off, gives you more time because you're being viewed by an audience. Yes, you are attempting to kill the leader of this company, a robo-billionaire. I think they call them robo-billionaires. And your whole activity is being streamed for the entertainment of the audience. And there's a lot of games in this vein, but this is the first one that at an immediate first glance, I can tell that they found their groove, right? This reminds me a lot of Ultra Kill in its early days, and it is going to lean into a very particular play style. This is not, there's a lot of games, like I mentioned, RoboQuest, which is very similar, but not nearly at this pace. Kickfoot or Foot Kick, whatever it was, is also very similar, but the intervening time between matches really killed any sense of keeping up the adrenaline. So after watching a couple of videos on this and seeing how well the developers done to make this really tight focused game, I believe they're Brazilian or from Portugal, a really small team. I was very impressed. The game is currently, I believe, in It's launched today.
Yeah, launch day.
Launched today.
The May 15th to be
May 15th.
exact, as we're recording.
There's a free demo. It's not hurting you to go try it. I haven't played a game like this in a while. It might be something to get me out of my rut. The system requirements are quite low. It's currently $18 if you like the full game. Windows 10, 2.4 gigahertz processor, 8 gigs of RAM, 4 gigabytes of space for installation. Some people are reporting the normal mode only takes a few hours to get through and feeling like you mastered it, but the devs say that challenging is where you should start the game. And they have multiple difficulties levels after that. One interesting thing is the difficulty levels have gone through a lot of iterations. And working with some of the YouTube reviewers, they found that at the highest difficulty, they made it so that the specific unique mechanics of doing really cool combo kills are the only way to get more time. So system mastery is going to be needed to be able to perform at those levels, which is exactly the kind of audience this game is aiming for.
Yeah.
But even still, even if it's not your type of game, you can play a demo for free and you can still have fun, just playing through the game and experiencing this complete cocaine rush of cyberpunk violence. Maybe in just a matter of a few hours. I felt like it was a nice, refreshing idea.
Yeah, definitely. I as you can tell, it's a labor of love because of the aesthetics. All like the sheer amount of like hand drawn art that's very present in this game looks super good. Very and like super reminiscent of 80s anime.
Yeah, it's like if 80s anime was invented in America.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. No, that's awesome. The kind of like Running Man feel or the Crank feel to it. That's fun. And yeah, with that art style seems like it's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then it also hits me a little bit in the nostalgia feels just because the very first scene is him cracking his knuckles in that intro that we were just showing. So reminds me a bit of starting Duke Nukem 3D for the first time, Yeah, you crack those knuckles, you grab a pistol, and you fly down a thing. Yeah.
Game like this stands on the shoulders of giants, and it's cool to see that games of this nature are still being worked on and developed. And not everything has to be a games as a service.
Yeah. You can still get massive dopamine hits without having loot boxes.
Yeah. I wanted to stab a robot that's wearing a tuxedo.
Yeah.
I mean, right from its intro, you walk in, it's like it focuses on an arcade and then it goes into the thing there. This feels like, we've all laughed at that video, like what if Game of Thrones was made in the 90s? This feels like what if Cyberpunk was on a 90s arcade machine? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what that felt like watching that. That looks really cool.
With the 10-second notion, like this could have been a quarter-fed arcade machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very neat. So yeah, again, Mullet MadJack. MadJack is one word. Developed by Hammer 95 Studios. Published by a studio, Epopea, Epoxy Games.
That's the one. Not quite the one, but close.
Not quite.
Yeah. Well, I've got a little bit of industry news to talk about. Little company called Square Enix. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a game that I was looking forward to not long ago called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I know that hasn't been talked about to death yet.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Rebirth, while it was critically acclaimed by both fans and reviewers alike. It's got a Metacritic score, a Metascore of 92 and a user score of 9.0, which is higher than Final Fantasy VII Remake's 87 Metascore and 8.1 user score.
Dang.
So not only did they put out a sequel that was actually better than Remake in basically every way, but it's acclaimed by basically everybody that's played it. It's hard to find an actual bad review. There are nitpicks about the game for sure. There are people that this game just isn't catering to, but that said, it's clearly a labor of love. It's clearly made by very competent developers, and it's very clear that they're willing to take their time on these releases, as there was like a 4-year gap between Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, despite having existing assets and despite having started development of Rebirth during the development of Remake. So it's very clear that they're willing to be patient with these releases and put out a product that they think people are going to like and that they like themselves. Despite all that, it hasn't been doing super well in sales. You can attribute that to many different things in that it's a sequel. A sequel to a game rarely does better sales than the original. It also definitely caters to an audience that liked the first one. So if you didn't like the first one, it's likely you're less likely to play the second one. So you get some user drop off there. All that said, it didn't quite meet the monetary expectations they expected with it, especially being in the Final Fantasy VII franchise, one of the world's most acclaimed video game franchises of all time. That happens right after the 2023 release of Final Fantasy XVI, which also pretty well reviewed. It actually has an identical Metacritic score to Final Fantasy VII Remake of 87 Metascore and an 8.1 user score. So while it's not as well acclaimed, it is pretty universally liked at the very least. Now, according to an investor call just last week, it seems like it's nearly making targets for what they expected in sales, but didn't quite make it. It is expected to have met that late because apparently sales of the game are still pretty on track with with what they expected. But what has scared Square Enix is that their operating income was expected by investors to be 57 billion yen this year. It looks like it's actually going to be closer to 40 billion yen.
Operating cost?
Operating income.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
That's a big drop.
Yeah, 17 billion yen is pretty significant. So it looks like Square Enix is going to have to do some layoffs. Now, Japanese culture is pretty significantly different than ours, especially in terms of business. While, most of the time in America, a lot of layoffs are announced to the public before they even happen in-house. A lot of developers in America find out that they're being laid off after it's been announced to the public. It's quite different in Japan. It's been known for a little while now that there would be layoffs across the U.S. and European offices. And Square Enix came out just 2 days ago, as of recording on the 15th of May, and said that they do have planned layoffs. They made a public announcement, not only to the general public, but also to their shareholders, that they were expecting to have to do some layoffs. Now, these layoffs don't necessarily mean canceled games, and it also doesn't necessarily mean that these people are not going to be rehired by Square Enix after they write their ship, which we'll get to in just a little while. But for right now, it does look like they're going to have to lay off some of their UK and US based employees. It's not known how many they're going to have to. That's still in the works. They're still trying to find out financially what they can support and actually how they can save as many jobs as they can. So in the interim, there are the people that are working, especially in the US and EU offices, they are, waiting to hear word on who is being removed. Fortunately, they do have notice. And Square Enix has pledged that they will be doing rehires if that is something they can do in the near future. Now, what does that mean for us as gamers? What that does mean is they are going to be canceling some games. These are unannounced titles so far. They have said that titles that they announced in 2021, like Dragon Quest 12, and there was Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake, are still being worked on. While there might be some delays because they might have to lay off some staff from those departments. It does look like those are still planned. Those are still in the making, and you can anticipate them to come out probably sometime in 2024.
I love that an HD remake of Dragon Quest 3 of all games is kept when each iterative Dragon Quest is almost just a remake of the game before it already.
Yeah. Especially when you consider that they have already invested, according to the investors call, $140 million into the games that they are canceling.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're not. Most of these are unannounced titles. Some of them are other projects. So this Square Enix does a lot more than just video games. They they do mobile gaming as well, but they also do anime. They also do comics and manga. So there are some cancellations in those spaces as well. Again, not named as of yet. But early news says that all of their works are going to be impacted in some way or another. Because it is expected that they'd have to make layoffs, even for some successful development departments. All of that said, Square Enix has publicly announced that they understand that this is a failure on the part of not only the developers, but also the publishing company, which is still Square Enix. They are self-publishing. They have taken the onus upon themselves as far as to how to right this ship. So instead of budget reductions and mass layoffs, which, of course there are some layoffs, but instead of, a few thousand people, it's estimated they're probably not going to have to go that crazy. Because they have decided in a very not like Square Enix move that they are, and I quote, going to aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy.
It's a big shift.
Yeah. Now, Square Enix still develops for Nintendo. They still develop for PlayStation. They still develop for Xbox. But as far as their major franchises like Dragon Quest, which is oftentimes a Nintendo exclusive or a timed Nintendo exclusive, or in some case, a timed PlayStation exclusive, and the Final Fantasy franchise, which has been for some time a PlayStation exclusive. It looks like they are going to be aggressively going multi-platform, and their plans are to hit not just PlayStation, but also Nintendo, also Xbox, and also PC. So it is expected that we will be seeing more simultaneous or only slightly time-gated releases of these games on other platforms, with a particular nod to Nintendo.
That's pretty interesting because honestly, I think of Square Enix and PlayStation as like almost like tandem, like they go hand in hand really with each other.
Yeah,
and with
they have for a long time.
And with how important exclusivity has been to the PlayStation model of late, we've covered it several times on the cast here.
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's really interesting because PlayStation cannot like that.
No, definitely not. But PlayStation also can't be paying them enough to justify them moving to other platforms. And at this point, they're realizing that without getting on these platforms early, especially after seeing the sales of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade on the PC, they realize that there is another audience for those other platforms. Remake or Intergrade sold like gangbusters on Steam. Now Remake is weird. It had a couple timed exclusives. It was a timed exclusive for 1 year on PlayStation, and then it was a timed exclusive for 1 year on Epic Games Store. That is something that they have also addressed and said that they may be looking at just putting it everywhere. It's very possible that in future Square Enix titles, we will be seeing some of their massive franchises like Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy doing simultaneous launches on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and then Nintendo, being that they have a significantly less powerful console, will need an entire new other dev team for these massive projects to make sure that it runs on their hardware. That said, Nintendo is working on another console. That's like the rumor mill has been alight for like 2 years of Switch 2. We still don't have any concrete news on the next Nintendo console, but of course they're working on it. So it's very possible that with the jump in performance to the next Nintendo console, that we might for a while be seeing just straight up simultaneous releases across the board is what they're aiming for. Switch 2 was even mentioned in their investors call, which I'm sure Nintendo probably can't be too happy about. But I think that was mostly alluding to the fact that they will be moving to Nintendo as soon as they can as well. All that said, it looks like that's going to be their strategy to try and bring talent back that they're having to lay off. I'm sure some people are going to be laid off permanently, but it does look like Activision Blizzard has, or not, sorry, Activision Blizzard, Square Enix has a plan to circumvent this loss that they've been seeing, especially year over year, while their operating revenue or income has been increasing year over year. It hasn't been what's been projected. So it's not like Square Enix is going anywhere. They have to tighten their belts for a little while, but I really do imagine that getting simultaneous releases for especially their major titles on the major platforms is going to be a huge boon to them in the future. So I have to applaud them because they're not looking for buyers. They're not looking for scapegoats. They admitted their faults. And while the unfortunate part of layoffs is happening, they're willing to rehire and they're willing to look outside of what they've been doing for the longest time and try something new. And I think we need to be seeing more of that in the gaming industry as a whole. You know, that said, again, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. They could be blowing smoke up our butts, but it does seem like the financially sound thing to do at the end of the day. So I have no doubts that we will start seeing more of those releases quicker to more platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Well, I mean, if you guys have anything to say on the issue, if we don't, then we can just move into some more video games.
I'm not surprised that Sony's not seeing massive revenues. They've made a lot of fucking strange calls the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And they're putting a lot of eggs into weird baskets. And the whole non-crossplay stuff,
Yeah.
it's just, it boggled my mind when it first started happening. It continues to boggle. And I'm breathing a minor sigh of relief to see that there might be seeing the light. So
I hope so.
Again, it's interesting that they're looking to aggressively diversify to multiple platforms, right?
I like these words. We'll see.
Sure. Xbox, well, Microsoft is also looking to do the same thing, right? I mean, that's what they say is like, we want Game Pass to be on everything.
Yeah.
We want more of the games on more of the things. And that's really, again, coming from Microsoft, you know, it's like Palpatine saying, like, we want more games on more platforms. You're like, that in theory sounds like what we want, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see another company following suit in that direction and trying to aggressively diversify where their games are going.
Yeah.
So I think it could be a turning of the corner, a rounding of the bend.
Imagine if you needed an entirely different piece of hardware to watch HBO or Apple or Netflix, right? That's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Sony and Microsoft and all these things.
Why would you say that out loud?
Because that's what Sony's been doing. They're like, if you want to use our streaming service to watch our shows, quote unquote, and this hypothesis, this, you know, mind experiment, you literally need a different piece of hardware because we want you to buy it.
Yeah.
Right? And that only flies for so long. I mean, they've had a lot of money to fuck around, but now they've kind of found out. It's like, yeah, just like give someone one console and they can use whatever streaming service they want, whether that's Game Pass or PSN or Ubisoft or, excuse me, I cursed there for a second. You know,
Bless you.
I mean, the world's going that way anyways. Fuck it, just make it happen, you know?
Yeah. No,
Just
I
be
mean,
smart and get a PC.
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's just exclusivity does nobody any good except for the platform in which something is exclusive to.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, these third parties, like, I can see them dropping ship if they are not making enough money. If Sony can't bridge the gap between what they'd make, across multiple platforms versus what they're giving them, then it just makes sense for them to jump ship and do it on multi-platforms.
Right.
I don't think there's any way Sony says, no, we don't want your next Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games on our console, even if they start putting them on Xbox and PC. So this just seems like a win-win for consumers and for Square Enix at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I mean it's pretty obvious. Like they need to make up a revenue stream, right? Their operating capital is like
17 million less than what they anticipated,
right?
I said billion.
Or yes, it's
It
billion
is in yen.
in yen, right? It's like what, like almost 15-20% somewhere in between there of like lower than expected operating capital. It's like, well, obviously we need more revenue. Like we need more streams.
Yeah.
So I mean that's simple math.
Yep.
Or well, not simple math, but easy math, I guess, in this case.
Easy enough.
Easy enough.
The number's too low. We need to get it higher. Yeah.
Get those numbers up.
Yep. So at the end of the day, hopefully we start seeing those games on more platforms. I mean, I know they have some kind of contract for Rebirth. I don't think there's any chance that that's coming out to other platforms any earlier than they already anticipate, which isn't public yet. So who knows when that's going to come to other platforms. I would love to see that game on PC. I really would. The PlayStation 5, I think, is a good piece of kit, but at the end of the day, my computer is just plain better. Yeah. I probably won't have to play it in performance mode for it to look good. So, I'm hopeful. Square Enix, for the most part, they stay out of major controversy and trouble. They just, as far as the quality of games that they've been churning out in the last 10 or 15 years, that's debatable. But people continue to love their major franchises. So, I'm very hopeful that we'll see the next Dragon Quest come out simultaneous release with multiple platforms, and same with Final Fantasy.
Well, do we want to kill that which cannot die, or talk about strange esoteric things?
Either one, man. I like both by the looks of it.
Let's go complete opposite of Mullet MadJack. So again, in further attempts to find something that we are not used to, something less Big Mac and more strange pulsing rainbow given form. I watched one of my YouTubers pick this game up a while back and give it a little 20-minute playthrough. And it is very striking. This game is called Dread Delusion. It is currently being developed by Lovely Hellplace, published by Dread XP. Lovely Hellplace's previous work seemed to be some kind of game jam combinatorics where they took a bunch of ideas, like 10 different games of strange veins, and kind of rolled them into one experience. And this is their first official actual full release of a game. Dread Delusion is the opposite of Mullet MadJack. It is obviously heavily inspired by works like Morrowind and like Arx Fatalis. This is a game in that dying breed that was early 2000s RPGs, before all the stereotypes of what an RPG needs to be kind of were cemented. The last vestige of the 90s imagination that allowed for very, very trippy, weird experiences. Is Dread Delusion a game? Yes, but we are verging into some weird territory. We're all familiar with the idea of a walking simulator. Not necessarily derogatory term in this context, but things like What Remains of Edith Finch and those. You are playing a game, in a sense, to experience a story. You do not have full agency, and you're not necessarily there to be enjoying the game for the mechanics' sake, but to experience the experience that the developers made for you. Dread Delusion kind of blurs those lines. It sits on the fence between something of a experience of the developer's imagination and an actual game. It has strong reviews on either side, which all games like this do. What is this game? Well, it is its own unique alien world, very visually themed around similar things to Morrowind and Arx Fatalis. But based in a gameplay style very, very reminiscent of immersive sims like Deus Ex, with the idea that your ability to tackle any encounter, situation, or problem in the game is not beholden to the mechanics. Stealth, dialogue, trickery, combat, violence, all these should be available to you. It's one of those games. It has multiple different endings depending on your actions throughout the game. these aren't new things, but they are standard to this type of game. What makes this game a little different is if it does anything right, if you're really going to try to disparage it, you cannot disparage the fact that this game has found that niche where literally just walking around exploring the game is the main draw. There are no numbers to be found, no +10 to jump rings to be found, but experiences, situations, little novellas and pastiches and areas off the map, if there even is a map in this game, that reward you for just being there trying to explore the world. The trailer is very combat focused, which is combat of the game, and as it's put by a lot of people, it is very, 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 very simple, but decently well done. But it's not necessarily the point. The point is you find a unique location, you get halfway through it, and maybe you don't have the means to progress further. The game does not expect you to find the secret. The secret might be anything else somewhere else in the game. You might find something that allows you to go back way far to an area you first encountered and reveal what is there for the sake of revealing it. Again, it's much more of a story than a game. You will not beat this by grinding at mobs to gain levels to be strong enough to win an encounter. It's a very polarizing thing, right? But again, it's nice to see that games of this ilk are still being made because there is a draw to them that you cannot replicate in other experiences, right? And I really like what I saw. It just released into 1.0, and being a smaller team in an indie game, it's got bugs. It is not the kind of game like the game we'll be talking about next, Death Must Die, where the first couple of chapters are extremely, extremely polished and the rest of the game isn't even done yet. This is the game that it's fully released. As far as I can tell, the full story is available at 1.0 release, but there's a lot of kind of hinkiness throughout that needs to be ironed out. And normally I would love to like give these guys like, hey, go check this out, you know, go buy it, give them their money. They deserve it. They've made a really interesting thing. It is $16 right now, 20% off. So it's pretty darn cheap. But given the nature of this game, that for some people it might have a lot of playthrough potential. For some, it might, like the concept of playing through it twice doesn't make sense because of the type of game it is. I would think that you'd want your experience in this game to be first time, only time. If I just had to roll a dice and say, what I do want you to do is follow it. Dread Delusion, keep an eye on it. If Morrowind, Arx Vitalis, any of these exploration story-driven games, if you like the idea of exploring and Breath of the Wild, like, oh, what's that around the corner? Oh, maybe I can get up there. This is that game boiled down to its essence. And hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months, they can work out some of those, like, you know, crashes to desktop and things that bring you out of the immersion. And you can experience a very unique kind of game for a really low price and support a good developer.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Really like what I saw of Dread Delusion. I think it's worth checking out.
Awesome. I'm going to talk about the look of it. I love the look of it. It reminds me very much of exactly what you said, like early 2000s, late 90s RPGs. I mean, this would have stressed my computer at the time. Wouldn't have probably done it, but
puts giant Citizen Kabuto to shame, right?
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I really do. I really do like the aesthetic. I also I kind of love that they're showing us a lot of the map in the trailer. Yeah. I like that.
This is one of those games where everything you see is get toable. There is no skybox. You will see the Vegas blurry island floating in the sky off in the distance, like beyond the clouds. That's a place you can go. Like, this is a completely open world game with no locked regions, no quest golden lines showing you where to go next. Right. If you get a quest, it might literally be a guy telling you the information you need to know, and you have to write it down in a journal. Right. This is the kind of game you want to play with like a pen and paper next to you.
Yeah.
Which is a very rare thing nowadays.
Totally. This is my first exposure to the game, and I'm already pretty well sold in that it looks like it took a lot of imagination to make, and I deeply appreciate that feeling.
One thing these games kind of live and die on, and is what actually pushed me over the edge to talk about it today, is that if your game is going to be so immersion based and it's not based off an insanely well-written plot or gameplay mechanics. It lives and dies based off its lore and its world building. And even the negative reviews of this game say that cannot be marked down. Like, if you just want to experience a very unique world building lore scenario, this game is full of it, which is good. Because, like, that is the point of playing this game, right? You're not playing it to beat it. You're not playing it to, speed run it. So it's good to hear.
It's a game where it's the journey that's the point rather than the destination.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. We got one more game to talk about.
We do. It's one we both played.
Yeah. So I guess I'll bring it up.
Sure.
We've talked about this game previously. The game is called Death Must Die.
Death Must Die.
And I really enjoy this game. Now, I picked it up in a really early version of it, played the crap out of it for a few days, and then felt like I had experienced most of what was to be experienced at the time, knowing that this is an early access game. I really didn't want to burn out on it before there was more content, knowing that more content was in the pipeline.
Was it just like 2-3 days, or was it longer than that?
Well,
2-3
calling
game
it
sessions?
days, so it's a lot of sessions. So I tend to pick this game up when I only have a little bit of time, because I know my run is only going to be 20 minutes. So we can assume from the time I launch to the time I close the game that it's going to be about 25 minutes total.
Yeah.
Doing stuff as far as meta progression goes, and then jumping into the game and playing it. So I pick it up in like 25, maybe 50-minute intervals. So I will do 1-2 runs basically every time I pick it up. That said, I've got like 17 hours or so in the game, so I've picked it up a lot, but it is for relatively short sessions. About half the time I pick this game up and play it, it's while I'm rendering the podcast or something.
Yeah,
so I have 40 minutes where I'm not going to be doing anything. This is 25, 30 minutes worth of game time, so it's perfect, right? So it is something where like, I'm waiting for one of you guys to get on to do the Tuesday show, and I do one run real quick. So it's something that I really enjoy, but I play in very small spurts. Yeah. But I've talked about it at length. So
what it is.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Death Must Die is a bullet heaven vampire survivors like. Kind of heavily Diablo 2 pixel-based coded in its art style. It, on one side of the table, plays very much like Hades. Every level up gives you 1 of 3 boon choices from a select number of gods, all of which who wish to kill death, notwithstanding your player character itself, who also has, depending on who you're playing as, their own reasons to be killing death. That is the synopsis of the story, and it's about as far as it goes. This game does not have any real story, just a general vibe of why everyone's here and what they're doing. The game, as of recently, has 2 different levels, acts as they're called. You have this gloomy, dark, catacomby forest-esque area, and then a desert sands, very... it's like Act 2 of Diablo 2.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm spacing the name. But yeah, they play a little differently. The first act is much more quantity of enemies over quality, whereas Act 2 introduces some very unique enemies, less numbers, more difficulty. But yeah, they're up to 7 different heroes you can play as, each of which has their own base mechanics and their own unique skill trees, focusing on different types of powers. You have powers that modify how you attack, powers that activate when you attack, like fire breaths or spinning chains. You have spells you cast, you have summons you can do, auras, things of that nature. And as you play through, you can select up to 3 gods per run, plus the fates, which are kind of the only unique thing, to modify your character into how you want to play. If you want to be all about attack power and speed and fire, you can pick Summer, the god of fire, and have a bunch of fire breaths and meteors and fire elementals. There's a god of winter, god of death, of time, of earth, lightning, and maybe 1 or 2 more that I don't remember off the top of my head. Lots of points of interest throughout the map as you're running around. They grant you various multiple choice offers of little boons or potentially curses, some trade-offs to modify your experience. But otherwise, it plays pretty much like every other Bullet Heaven. It's just fairly tightly tuned. This game is way more polished than it needs to be this early into its career, and it feels like a full game, especially given that you've played it about 17 hours. I'm done with it at about 30. It's hard to gauge because I accidentally left the game running like 4 days in a row when I wasn't home. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. The balance is very good. B plus, A minus, somewhere in there. There's certain abilities that scale way too slow or way too high right now, but those can be fixed with simple patches. Yeah, it's a very good game that at the start has a lot of RNG, and a lot of these Bolt Heavens give you ways to control that RNG, try to get more consistency. The boons you get granted from gods come in different qualities, and you can eventually get gear that gives you attempts to reroll to get better qualities, because the higher the quality, the better the scaling. A white quality skill at level 1 to level 10 might triple in damage, where a legendary quality can be up to 10 times as much damage, right? So it defines a lot of your run, how well it's going to go. But yeah, this is almost like a second monitor game. I listen to podcasts while I play it.
Oh, yeah.
I played through the first area, did a couple reruns to get a little grinding out of the way, and I got into Area 2 and really enjoyed it. And I've now cranked up the meta difficulty to the point where my item drop chance is maximized, and in exchange for pretty much tripling the enemy's capacity. And about half my characters are good enough to routinely beat it. Yeah, I really like it. It kind of abruptly ends, because right now there's 2 chapters of a game, and I don't know how many there's going to be, maybe 3 or 4 if I had to guess.
I don't know that that's been announced in the pipeline. I haven't looked at more recent patch notes, but I haven't seen that.
Given the way the items work, there's probably going to be at least 1 more character, but I could see them adding 2 or 3. There's so much of the characters is kind of based off the boons that I'd say it's about 50-50. Characters are not wholly dependent on their own skills. And a lot of the play can just be dependent on which gods you pick and their rarities. But I've made some fun builds, especially once you get to endgame and your skill tree is able to be maximized. At the end of the skill tree, there's a bunch of different unique skills, of which you can only take 1, like a super powerful red dragon you can summon, or you're critically poisoning every enemy every time you attack, or just plus 400% attack damage if you want to make just a fast attack build. So you have the opportunity to re-roll your skill trees for a very cheap amount of money. So there's lots of room to theory craft and play around. And yeah, as far as Bolt Heaven goes, especially in the last 2 years, easily top 5 in quality. You can get a good, probably minimum 15 to 20 hours out of the game, 30, 40 if you really want to try to push those numbers.
Yeah, and I think the game normally sells at $10.
Yeah, and it's what, $7 is what I bought it for?
On sale it goes down for like $7 or $5.
And that's a really big thing. Is like I've been talking about these cool games, these indie games that are $15, $25. It's like $7.
Yeah, dude.
Like that's one Caramel Macchiato Grand Exchange train station,
That one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
No, I enjoy this game immensely. From the moment I picked it up, it felt so well refined, and there was clearly a lot of thought put into the mechanics and the balance. Now, I do want to let you guys know, if you are watching this on YouTube or on Twitch, what I'm showing on screen is a really early build of the game. I uploaded this to YouTube on December 20th of 2023. And this was recorded significantly earlier than that. This is one of my first playthroughs of the game. So, what you're seeing on screen right now is not totally indicative of the game now. Quite a few little details have changed in the UI, especially when picking boons and inventory. So it is different now. I wouldn't say hugely substantially. What you're seeing is basically what you get in the early game. But I do want to let you know that things have changed, and I did want to put the caveat in there that this is an early build. So some things changed, and I think all for the better. For instance, when you are looking at the boon menu trying to pick one, on the left side now, it actually shows you powers versus strikes versus magic and what you have taken already. That's actually something that was added in this most recent patch. So few quality of life improvements, few gameplay improvements, an entire new map that I actually haven't experienced yet because I kind of got behind in the game, as it were. So the lot of really good changes. Clearly a labor of love, and again, for as early access as it is, this game feels really tight.
Yeah.
And I have I just have to let you know I have an immense amount of fun playing this. I haven't bored of the game at all. I just find that it happens to be a game that fits in a really tight time space. So that's what I use it for. I think the game would be great on even mobile. I think this would make an excellent something to pick up on the Switch. Oh, totally great Steam Deck game. Yeah. I think I did check that. I'm pretty sure last time it was playable on Steam Deck, so it's not optimized. And I could see a few of the UI elements being a little tough on the Steam Deck, but I imagine it's totally playable. It is controller playable, so I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, if to see this game come out for other platforms, I'd love to see that because I think it would be great on Switch. That's where Hades saw a lot of its success was on the Switch, and I think this game could benefit from that kind of exposure. That being said, it is an extremely early access. There's a lot of plans for this game in the future, so I imagine if we were to see it move to multi-platform, it'd probably be pretty significantly further in the future. So
a lot of Reddit posts are saying it runs great on Steam Deck, 90 hertz on OLED, works great.
Yeah, because of its short, the runs are only 20 minutes.
Maximum, because some of the boss shows up. So.
Right. So, exactly, maximum. He could definitely fail sooner than that. So I think this is, like, if you're taking a bus ride or something, I think this is a perfect game. Like,
yeah. And if it helps, if you're not sold, like, I've played all of Brotato. I've played majority of Vampire Survivors. I've played 20 minutes till dawn. I've played a lot of Bullet Heavens.
Yeah.
And just know that, like, the quality presented here is egregious. Like, again, just the last time, it does not need to be as polished as it is at this point. So I'm excited to see what the full game is going to look like.
Yeah, me too. Because from here on out, I think it's just, introducing more mechanics and making sure they're balanced. And it feels like, especially for an early access game, it already feels pretty much there. So, again, that was Death Must Die. It's something that we've talked about before, something that we'll probably talk about again once there's more content for it. So it's something that I would keep my eyes on as it develops, especially for the low cost of $10 when it's not on sale.
Well, speaking of dying, any last words, Josh?
No, dude, this looks cool as fuck.
Hell, it is, dude. I really recommend it highly.
And at that price point, I mean, come on. We've thrown out some pretty good options for cheap and accessible games. I've been playing a bit of Manor Lords. I've still been having a blast playing that. No new real updates. I'm looking forward to some things I'm reading that are coming in the first big patch. But Manor Lords still doing great. This looks fun. Try out some indie games, guys.